The champagne shimmered on the floor, mixing with the crimson blossoming from my split lip. He stood over me, a titan of rage in a perfectly tailored suit, his face a mask of disappointment I'd seen 1,000 times before. Around us, the music faded, the laughter died, and the fairy tale of my sister's wedding dissolved into a nightmare painted with expensive decorations and the bitter scent of betrayal. They thought that because I didn't fight back, I was defeated. They were wrong. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you called family, subscribe now and let's share stories of strength together. There is power in a family that stands together. My name is Ella, and up until that moment, I'd lived a life carefully constructed around pleasing everyone but myself. My father, Robert, was a self-made man, or so he constantly reminded us, the kind who believed that success was measured in dollars and obedience. My older sister, Clara, was the golden child, beautiful, accomplished, and perpetually praised. I, on the other hand, was Ella, the quiet one, the one who always tried too hard, the one who never quite measured up. Growing up, it was always Clara this and Clara that. Clara got the best schools, Clara got the new car, Clara's accomplishments were plastered all over social media. I was always in the background, the supporting character in her carefully curated life. I didn't resent her for it, I loved her. I just wished, sometimes, that my father would see me, really see me, for who I was, not just as a shadow of my sister. The wedding was at a sprawling vineyard in Napa Valley, an obscene display of wealth that made me deeply uncomfortable. I knew my parents had spared no expense for Clara, but the sheer extravagance felt vulgar, especially knowing the struggles some of our relatives were facing. I tried to voice my concerns to my mother, but she just waved me off, saying, "It's Clara's day, Ella, just be happy for her." So I plastered on a smile and played my part, flitting around, making sure everyone had a drink, their hors d'oeuvres, their programs, doing everything I could to make things run smoothly. I even swallowed my discomfort when my father made a snide comment about my lack of ambition during the rehearsal dinner. I was used to it. His words were like a dull ache, always present, but I'd learned to ignore them. The breaking point wasn't the comment itself, but the timing. It was supposed to be a happy occasion, a celebration of love, not an opportunity for him to belittle me. The tension had been building all day. I noticed my father's eyes following me, a storm brewing behind them. I tried to avoid him, but at the reception, he cornered me near the bar. He started, as he usually did, with a veiled criticism of my career choices, my lack of a real job, my supposed dependence on my boyfriend, Mark. I tried to defend myself, explaining that I was happy with my work as a freelance photographer, that Mark was supportive and kind, but he wouldn't listen. His voice grew louder, fueled by champagne and years of pent-up disappointment. People started to stare. I begged him to stop, to please not ruin Clara's day, but he just sneered, telling me that I was always ruining everything, that I was a constant source of embarrassment to the family. That's when he said it. The words that finally shattered the fragile peace I had so carefully maintained. He told me I was a disgrace and that Clara deserved better than to have me as a sister. The person I trusted most was one of them. It wasn't just my father's words, but the look on Clara's face as she stood nearby, watching the scene unfold. There was no shock, no horror, only a faint flicker of annoyance, as if I were a stain on her perfect wedding dress. That was the moment something inside me broke. That was the moment the silence ended. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I couldn't keep trying to earn their approval because it would never come. I excused myself and walked away, feeling his gaze burning into my back. I thought that was the end of it, just another painful memory to add to the pile. I was wrong. He followed me. He grabbed my arm, spun me around, and slammed me into the wall. The world exploded in a flash of pain, and the taste of crimson filled my mouth. He stood over me, breathing heavily, his eyes blazing. He told me I was finished, that he would make sure I never amounted to anything. That's when someone screamed. A guest had captured the entire incident on video, the video that would soon change everything. The searing pain in my face was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. Humiliation washed over me as I stumbled away, the echo of my father's words ringing in my ears. Clara didn't even bother to follow. I found Mark outside, his face etched with concern. He rushed to my side, his gentle touch a stark contrast to the brutality I had just experienced. I couldn't bring myself to tell him what had happened, not yet. The shame was too raw, too consuming. I just mumbled something about tripping and asked him to take me home. The drive back was a blur. I stared out the window, watching the vineyards fade into the darkness, each mile taking me further away from the fairy tale that had crumbled so spectacularly. I replayed the scene in my head, over and over, trying to understand how my own father could treat me with such contempt. Was I really that worthless? Was I really that much of a disappointment? The questions swirled in my mind, a relentless storm of self-doubt and pain. Mark tried to comfort me, but I just pulled away, unable to bear his sympathy. I needed to be alone with my thoughts to process the wreckage of my shattered illusions. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, haunted by the memory of my father's rage and Clara's indifference. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, contorted with anger, his words like venomous darts piercing my soul. I tried to convince myself that it was just the champagne talking, that he didn't really mean those things. But deep down, I knew the truth. His words were a reflection of how he had always seen me, a constant reminder of my perceived inadequacies. I thought about confronting him, demanding an apology, but the thought of another confrontation filled me with dread. I knew it would only lead to more pain, more humiliation. So I did what I always did. I swallowed my feelings and tried to pretend that everything was okay. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a swollen lip. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the bruised and battered face staring back at me. Was this really me? Had I become so accustomed to being treated poorly that I no longer recognized my own worth? I dabbed concealer on the darkening bruise, a futile attempt to hide the physical manifestation of my emotional scars. I couldn't let Mark see me like this. I couldn't let anyone see how broken I really was. I tried to avoid my family in the days that followed, but it was impossible. My mother called, feigning concern, asking how I was doing, but her voice lacked sincerity. I knew she was just trying to smooth things over, to maintain the illusion of a perfect family. I told her I was fine, that it was just a misunderstanding, but she didn't press. She never did. Clara sent a text message, a brief, impersonal apology for the drama at her wedding. It felt like a hollow gesture, a way for her to absolve herself of any responsibility. There was no mention of my father's behavior, no acknowledgement of the pain he had inflicted. It was as if the entire incident had been erased, swept under the rug like an embarrassing secret. I didn't respond. What was there to say? I realized that their silence was just as damaging as my father's words. It was a confirmation of my deepest fears, that I didn't matter, that my feelings were insignificant. The video. It surfaced online. A guest had posted it, either out of spite or a misguided sense of justice. It went viral within hours. The internet exploded with outrage. My father, the respected businessman, the pillar of the community, was exposed for what he truly was: a bully, a tyrant, an abuser. The comments were brutal. People called for his resignation, his boycott, his public shamming. My family's carefully constructed image shattered into a million pieces. I watched the fallout with a mixture of horror and grim satisfaction. Part of me felt vindicated. Finally, the world could see what I had endured for so long. But another part of me felt sick. This wasn't how I wanted things to end. I didn't want to destroy my family. I just wanted to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. But it was too late. The damage was done. The video had unleashed a force that I couldn't control, a tidal wave of anger and condemnation that threatened to engulf everything in its path. My father called, his voice trembling with rage. He blamed me, of course. He accused me of orchestrating the whole thing, of deliberately trying to ruin his life. I tried to explain that I had nothing to do with the video, that I was just as shocked as he was, but he wouldn't listen. He screamed and cursed, spewing venom and hatred. I hung up the phone, tears streaming down my face. I realized that there was no going back. The chasm between us had grown too wide, the wounds too deep. The consequences were swift and severe. My father lost his job. His reputation was ruined. His friends and colleagues turned their backs on him. My mother was devastated, torn between her loyalty to her husband and her concern for her daughters. Clara's perfect life began to unravel. Her social circle ostracized her. Her carefully curated image was tarnished. The wedding, once a symbol of her success, became a source of shame and embarrassment. I watched their world crumble, feeling a strange mix of pity and resentment. They had brought this upon themselves. They had created a monster, and now they were paying the price. But even in their downfall, they refused to acknowledge their own culpability. They continued to blame me, to paint me as the villain, the one who had destroyed their family. And maybe they were right. Maybe I was the villain. But I was also the victim. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to fight back, even if it means burning everything to the ground. The video was just the beginning. I knew I couldn't let them get away with what they had done. I had to expose their secrets, their lies, their carefully concealed darkness. I had to show the world the truth, no matter the cost. The silence in my apartment was deafening. It amplified the frantic beat of my heart, the tremor in my hands. Mark tried to be supportive, but I pushed him away, retreating into myself. I couldn't explain the depth of my despair, the feeling that I was drowning in a sea of shame and anger. He didn't understand the years of subtle put-downs, the constant pressure to be someone I wasn't, the feeling of never being good enough. He saw the video, of course. Everyone did. His reaction was one of protective fury, a righteous anger that I couldn't quite muster. He wanted to call the police, to file charges, to make my father pay for what he had done. But I stopped him. I knew that involving the authorities would only prolong the agony, turning our private drama into a public spectacle. Besides, the law couldn't fix what was truly broken, the fractured bonds of my family. I locked myself in my room, the curtains drawn, the world outside a distant hum. I scrolled through the endless stream of comments on the video, each one a fresh wound. Some people praised me for my courage, hailing me as a survivor. Others condemned me for airing my dirty laundry in public, accusing me of seeking attention. But most of them were just voyeurs, feasting on the spectacle of our family's destruction. I wanted to disappear, to erase myself from existence, to escape the relentless scrutiny of the online mob. The weight of their judgment was crushing, suffocating. It felt like I was being buried alive, the digital dirt piling up, inch by inch, until I could no longer breathe. Days turned into weeks. I lost my appetite. Sleep became a luxury. I barely left my apartment, afraid of facing the stares, the whispers, the judgment. Mark grew increasingly worried, his gentle concern replaced by a strained exasperation. He tried to coax me out of my shell, to remind me of the things I loved, but I was unresponsive, lost in my own private hell. Our relationship, once a source of comfort and stability, began to fray under the pressure. I could see the disappointment in his eyes, the unspoken question of whether I would ever be the same. I didn't blame him. I was a shadow of my former self, a broken, hollow shell. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, reliving the scene at the wedding over and over again, each time with a new layer of pain and humiliation. The shame was all-consuming, a toxic poison that seeped into every corner of my being. I started to question everything about myself, my choices, my worth, my very identity. Was my father right? Was I really a failure? Was I destined to be a disappointment? The questions swirled in my mind, a relentless chorus of self-doubt and despair. I felt like I was standing on the edge of an abyss, the darkness beckoning, promising oblivion. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting long, ominous shadows across my room, I found myself staring at a bottle of pills in my medicine cabinet. It was an old prescription, a leftover from a previous bout of anxiety. I held the bottle in my hand, the plastic cool against my skin. The label warned of potential side effects, of drowsiness, of impaired judgment. But all I could think about was the escape it offered, the sweet release from the pain. The thought of ending it all, of simply ceasing to exist, was strangely alluring. It was a way to silence the voices, to numb the pain, to escape the relentless scrutiny of the world. I opened the bottle, the pills spilling into my palm, a constellation of oblivion. I closed my eyes, the taste of despair bitter on my tongue. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. A small, stubborn voice whispered, "Don't let them win." It was a faint spark, barely audible above the roar of my despair, but it was enough. I opened my eyes, the pills still clutched in my hand. I stared at them for a long moment, then with a sudden surge of determination, I threw them into the trash. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them define me. I would find a way to survive, to reclaim my life, to emerge from the ashes stronger than before. The transition wouldn't be easy, I knew, but it was necessary. I would no longer be the victim. I would become the planner. That night I couldn't sleep. But this time, it wasn't the restless tossing and turning of despair, but the feverish energy of resolve. I sat at my desk, the glow of the laptop illuminating my face. I started to research, to gather information, to piece together the fragments of my shattered life. I thought about my father, his arrogance, his ruthlessness, his carefully constructed empire. I thought about Clara, her ambition, her entitlement, her unwavering loyalty to her father. And I thought about all the things they had hidden, the secrets they had buried, the lies they had told. As the night wore on, a plan began to take shape in my mind. It was a risky plan, a dangerous plan, but it was the only way to truly expose them, to hold them accountable for their actions. I would use their own weapons against them, their wealth, their power, their carefully cultivated image. I would uncover their secrets, reveal their lies, and bring their empire crashing down around them. It wouldn't be easy, but I was no longer afraid. The pain had hardened me, the betrayal had sharpened my resolve. I was ready to fight back. The laptop became my weapon. Hours melted away as I dove deep into the labyrinth of my father's business dealings. I started with the obvious: public records, court documents, news articles. But that was just the surface. The real secrets were buried deeper, hidden behind layers of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and carefully worded contracts. I needed a guide, someone who knew the terrain. That's when I thought of Daniel, a former employee of my father's who had been unceremoniously dismissed a few years prior. I remembered him as a decent man, someone who had always treated me with kindness. I tracked him down through social media, hesitant to reach out, unsure of how he would react. To my surprise, he agreed to meet me for coffee. The moment I mentioned my father's name, a flicker of anger flashed in his eyes. He had been wronged, and the resentment still lingered. I laid out my plan, carefully omitting the video, focusing instead on my desire to expose my father's corrupt practices. Daniel listened intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to cautious interest. He knew where the bodies were buried, figuratively speaking. He had access to documents, to emails, to inside information that could be invaluable. The information would expose my father's illegal activities. He agreed to help on one condition: anonymity. He was afraid of retribution, of my father's long reach. I assured him that his identity would be protected, that I would take all the necessary precautions. It was a risk for both of us, but we were united by a common goal: to bring my father to justice. Daniel became my mole, my inside source, feeding me information, guiding me through the maze of my father's empire. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered. My father wasn't just a successful businessman, he was a predator, a manipulator, a man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. I discovered instances of fraud, tax evasion, and shady deals that had cost ordinary people their savings and their livelihoods. He had been systematically looting his company for years, siphoning off funds into secret accounts, using his wealth and influence to silence anyone who dared to question him. Clara was complicit, too. She was her father's loyal lieutenant, helping him to manage the finances, to cover his tracks, to protect his reputation. I felt a surge of anger, hot and visceral. They were both monsters, hiding behind a facade of respectability. I needed proof, something concrete that would stand up in court, that would convince the authorities to take action. Daniel provided me with copies of incriminating documents, but they weren't enough. I needed something more, something irrefutable. That's when I decided to focus on the security cameras at the winery. I remembered my father bragging about the state-of-the-art surveillance system, how it could record every inch of the property, how it could deter any potential threats. He thought it was a tool for protection, but I saw it as an opportunity for exposure. If I could access the footage, I might find evidence of his illegal activities, of his interactions with shady characters, of his own admissions of guilt. The problem was, the security system was heavily guarded, accessible only to a select few. I needed a way in, a backdoor, a loophole. I spent days researching cybersecurity, learning about hacking techniques, studying the vulnerabilities of different systems. It was a steep learning curve, but I was determined to master it. I practiced on dummy systems, honing my skills, perfecting my techniques. I knew that one mistake could expose me, could alert my father to my plan. I had to be careful, methodical, and precise. I contacted a friend from college who was a computer whiz, someone I knew I could trust. I explained my situation, carefully omitting the personal details, focusing instead on my need to access a secure network. He was hesitant at first, wary of getting involved in something illegal, but I convinced him that it was for a good cause, that I was fighting for justice. He agreed to help, providing me with the tools and the knowledge I needed to bypass the security measures. It was a nerve-wracking process, a delicate dance between stealth and detection. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope. One wrong step could send me plummeting into the abyss. But I persevered, driven by a burning desire for revenge. Finally, after weeks of painstaking effort, I managed to breach the security system. I was in. The winery's entire surveillance network was at my fingertips. I felt a rush of adrenaline, a sense of exhilaration. I had done it. Now came the hard part, sifting through the hours of footage, searching for the evidence I needed. It was a tedious, time-consuming task, but I was prepared to do whatever it took. I watched the camera feeds, fast-forwarding, rewinding, analyzing every frame. I saw my father conducting business meetings, making phone calls, interacting with employees. I saw Clara overseeing the operations, managing the finances, keeping a watchful eye on everything. I saw glimpses of their true selves, their arrogance, their ruthlessness, their disdain for anyone who wasn't part of their inner circle. And then I found it. A series of recordings that showed my father meeting with a known racketeer. The footage was grainy, but the audio was clear. I heard my father discussing a deal, a transaction that involved bribery, extortion, and the use of threats. It was all there, the smoking gun, the irrefutable proof of his criminal activities. I copied the recordings onto a secure drive, knowing that they could change everything. I also found something else, something even more disturbing. Footage of Clara manipulating the company's finances, diverting funds into secret accounts, falsifying records to conceal their illegal activities. She wasn't just complicit, she was an active participant in my father's scheme. I felt a cold fury wash over me. They were both going down. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I knew the exact date of the annual shareholders' meeting, when all the key players would be gathered in one room. This was my opportunity, my chance to expose them to the world. I had carefully crafted a presentation, compiling all the evidence I had gathered, the documents, the recordings, the financial records. I had also contacted a journalist, someone I trusted to tell my story, to expose the truth about my family. She was skeptical at first, hesitant to believe my claims, but I convinced her to review the evidence. She was shocked by what she saw. She agreed to run the story, to publish the findings, to expose my father and Clara for who they really were. The day of the meeting arrived. I felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. I knew that what I was about to do would change my life forever. I walked into the building, my heart pounding in my chest. My father and Clara were already there, greeting the guests, smiling and shaking hands, playing the part of the perfect hosts. They didn't see me coming. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and walked towards the stage. It was time to reveal everything. The shareholders' meeting. The culmination of weeks of planning, of sleepless nights fueled by caffeine and fury. I walked in, a ghost in my own life, unrecognizable to those who thought they knew me. My father, the king of his crumbling castle, stood beaming, hand outstretched, greeting the vipers who'd come to feast. Clara, ever the dutiful princess, by his side, her smile a perfect mask. They hadn't a clue, that was their weakness. Their arrogance, their unwavering belief in their own untouchability. They thought I was broken, defeated, hiding in shame. They thought they had won. That's when I knew my plan would work. As I approached the stage, I could feel their eyes on me. Curiosity, perhaps a hint of amusement. Let them laugh. Their laughter would soon turn to ash. I took the microphone, the weight of it strangely comforting in my trembling hand. I looked out at the assembled crowd, their faces a sea of indifference and veiled contempt. But among them I saw her. The journalist, my ally, her eyes locked on mine, a silent promise of support. I began to speak, my voice clear and steady, the words carefully chosen, each one a dagger aimed at their carefully constructed facade. I started with a brief overview of my father's company, its history, its success, its reputation for integrity. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Then I paused, took a deep breath, and dropped the bomb. But behind the facade, I said, my voice now laced with steel, lies a web of deceit, corruption, and criminal activity. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a collective shifting of weight, a sense of unease. My father's smile faltered, just for a moment, but it was enough. I had their attention. I proceeded to lay out the evidence, methodically and relentlessly. The documents, the recordings, the financial records, each one a nail in their coffin. I revealed the instances of fraud, the tax evasion, the shady deals that had enriched my father at the expense of others. I played the recordings of his meetings with the racketeer, the discussions of bribery and extortion, the threats that revealed the true depths of his depravity. The room was silent now, the only sound the steady hum of the projector displaying the evidence for all to see. Clara's face was ashen, her eyes wide with disbelief. My father's face was a mask of fury, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. Then I turned my attention to Clara. And she, I said, pointing directly at her, was his willing accomplice. I presented the evidence of her financial manipulations, the diverted funds, the falsified records, the lies she had told to protect her father's empire. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the gasps of shock and disbelief. I could feel their hatred, their anger, their desperate attempts to deny the truth. But the evidence was irrefutable, undeniable, impossible to ignore. My father stood up, his face contorted with rage. "This is a lie," he shouted, his voice trembling with fury. "These are fabrications, she's trying to destroy me." I simply smiled. "Is it a lie," I asked, my voice calm and steady, "that you have been systematically looting your company for years? Is it a lie that you have been bribing officials, extorting your competitors, and threatening anyone who dared to question you? Is it a lie that you and Clara have been diverting funds into secret accounts, falsifying records to conceal your crimes?" He had no answer. His silence was an admission of guilt. I had one final piece of evidence, the most damning of all, the security footage. I displayed the video of my father confessing to the act he committed, the words echoing through the room, a final devastating blow to his reputation. The room erupted in chaos. The shareholders were shouting, demanding answers, calling for his resignation. The police arrived, summoned by the journalist, their sirens wailing in the distance. My father and Clara were surrounded, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and utter defeat. As they were led away in handcuffs, I allowed myself a small, private smile. It was over, I had won. But the game wasn't over, not yet. As the authorities escorted my father and Clara out of the building, their empire crumbling around them, I noticed something I hadn't anticipated. A flicker of something in Clara's eyes, not defeat, not remorse, something else. Something calculating. It was then that I knew I hadn't truly won. Not yet. Because Clara, cornered and desperate, was about to unleash a final, devastating blow. And it was aimed directly at me. The news reports exploded across every channel, every website. My father and Clara's arrest was the story of the hour, their crimes laid bare for the world to see. But amidst the reports of fraud and corruption, a new narrative began to emerge. A narrative carefully crafted by Clara, a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of her reputation. She accused me of being motivated by revenge, of manipulating the evidence, of orchestrating the entire scandal to destroy my family. She painted herself as a victim, an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire of my vendetta. And then she dropped the bomb. She revealed the video of my wedding day, the video that had started it all. She claimed that I had released the video myself, seeking attention, seeking sympathy, seeking to destroy my father out of spite. The world turned against me in an instant. I went from being a whistleblower to a villain, from a victim to a perpetrator. The online mob turned on me with a vengeance, their comments even more vicious and hateful than before. I was crucified, vilified, and condemned. They were coming for me. The world exploded. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, each notification a fresh wave of condemnation. My name, once whispered with respect or fear, was now a curse spat out with venom. Clara had successfully turned the tables, casting me as the villain in her twisted drama. I watched, numb, as my life unraveled, the carefully constructed plan threatening to collapse around me. But amidst the chaos, a flicker of resolve ignited within me. I refused to be silenced. I refused to let her win. She thought she had played her final card, but she underestimated me. She didn't know that I had anticipated this move, that I had a counter-strategy in place, a contingency plan for her desperate attempt to smear my name. It was time to unleash the final weapon, the one she never saw coming. I contacted the journalist, my voice trembling but firm. "It's time," I said. "Release everything." The next morning, the internet imploded. The journalist published a series of articles, each one meticulously dismantling Clara's narrative, exposing her lies, and revealing the truth about her role in my father's crimes. But it wasn't just the articles that caused the uproar. It was the evidence that accompanied them. The journalist had obtained a copy of Daniel's full testimony, detailing Clara's involvement in the financial manipulations and her active participation in my father's scheme. But the real bombshell was the audio recording. The recording of Clara confessing to her crimes, admitting to her role in the cover-up, and revealing the depth of her depravity. I had secretly recorded a conversation with her weeks before, pretending to offer her a chance to come clean, knowing she would incriminate herself. The recording was damning, irrefutable, and utterly devastating to her reputation. The world watched in horror as Clara's carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the monster beneath. The fallout was swift and brutal. Clara was immediately abandoned by her allies, her friends, and her supporters. The company severed all ties with her, denouncing her actions and vowing to cooperate with the authorities. Her reputation was in tatters, her name synonymous with deceit and corruption. She was a pariah, an outcast, forever branded as a criminal. My father, already facing a litany of charges, was further implicated by Clara's confession. The evidence against him mounted, the walls closing in, his empire collapsing around him. He was facing a long prison sentence, his legacy tarnished beyond repair. As for me, the tide began to turn. The online mob, initially so quick to condemn me, now shifted their allegiance, praising me for my courage, applauding me for exposing the truth. My name was cleared, my reputation restored, my story vindicated. I had weathered the storm, survived the attack, and emerged stronger than before. I watched as Clara's world crumbled, her face a mask of rage and despair as she realized the game was truly over. They lost everything. I just smiled. They lost their freedom, their wealth, their reputation, and their power. They lost everything they had ever valued, everything they had worked so hard to achieve. They were left with nothing but shame, regret, and the bitter taste of defeat. As I watched them being led away, their faces etched with misery, I felt a sense of closure, a sense of justice served. But there was no joy, no triumph, no satisfaction. Only a profound sense of sadness and a deep understanding of the destructive power of revenge. I knew that this victory had come at a cost, that I had sacrificed a part of myself in the process. I had become someone I never wanted to be, someone capable of such calculated cruelty. But I also knew that I had done what was necessary, that I had protected myself and others from their malice, and that I had brought them to justice for their crimes. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.